We'll Work for Patients, episode 43.
And then within a month, I became a supervisor of claims. Within 2 weeks after I worked at that company, they taught me how to deny claims. The question is whether or not pre-authorization is required. And if they say no, you want it in writing. How many visits are going to be allowed and within what time period. And that's more important than anything else. And they'll authorize it. They'll authorize it. You'll have it in writing. And then all of a sudden, we need medical records to prove these are still needed. And the family already paid for her at $1,800 a day for 37 days. And what are they getting back? Zero. I love educating others because the major reason for bankruptcy in the United States are medical bills.
What up, Will Workers? Frank Sardella here, and I am in a state of complete relief because I just found out there is hope for the impossible. I'm talking about insurance coverage and specifically getting paid. That's right, and my guest today is going to set the record straight by giving you the skinny on how she evolved from having been taught to deny insurance claims to advocating payment to the insured. Today's guest is an insurance advocate, author of a book no insured should be without, and has helped collect millions of dollars of otherwise uncollectible and unjustly denied insurance claims. So shut off the computer, set aside your worries, and get ready to learn something that could help your practice bottom line and your patients too. Today's episode is entitled, Insurance is No Longer an Incurable Disease. Here we go.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Will Work for Patients, a free advice podcast dedicated to help chiropractors get on purpose and grow their practices. Get ready to tune in and turn up the volume of your practice marketing. And now, turning up the volume on his mic, big-time chiropractic advocate and your host, here is Frank Sardella.
Hey, that's me, Will Workers, and I'm back. Yes, it's a great day to have another blockbuster episode, and do I have one for you today. I'm very excited to bring this one to you. It's been in the works for a couple of months, and I go back and forth with a lot of my guests a lot of the time, but it's every bit worth it and time well invested, I can tell you that, so I can't wait to bring this one to you today. I know I keep saying it every single episode, but I really want you to tune in to the Sunday Morning Hustle. And if you're not joining us in the Sunday Morning Hustle, you're missing out on all the fun, and I'm getting a lot of successes coming back to me. So make sure you reach out to me, frank@screeningexperts.com, and find out how you can get in on all the action. I will send you the free premiere installment of the Sunday Morning Hustle, replay on demand, and then you can do a trial month for $29. That's 4 Sundays. Folks, you can't get coaching that cheaply anywhere on the planet. I don't know, I must be out of my right mind for giving it away, but that's how badly I want you on the call. So make sure you're tuning in for the Sunday Morning Hustle. Speaking of which, we took something up in this week's installment of the Sunday Morning Hustle, my super secret formula for chiropractic marketing. I call it the Practice Wealth Differential. It's a mathematical formula you can use to calculate just where you are in practice, and more importantly, to show you how to get anywhere you want to go. I have a video. You can find it at willworkforpatients.com/secret formula, and you'll be able to see a video of it there, but we covered it in detail along with exactly what you're going to do about it in the Sunday Morning Hustle coaching call, and you can only receive that there. So make sure you do reach out to me about that. Today's episode is entitled, Insurance is No Longer an Incurable Disease, and my guest today is going to prove that to you conclusively, if emphatically, and already has proven it to the many clients she serviced as an insurance advocate. Now, I met today's guest at an event. In fact, we have a common connection, actually. Episode 37, Inspiration Can Transform Your Practice, I interviewed Nanette DeGroat, founder of Breakthrough M2 Weight Loss. Nan throws an amazing acknowledgement event for her clients every single year, and it is quite the extravaganza, let me tell you. My guest today was a speaker at that event, and I had to meet her. She was gracious enough to give me a signed copy of her book, a book you're going to want to read, by the way, and even get copies out to your patients. And I asked her if I could interview her and pick her brain for my faithful and devoted listeners who are cranking away in the trenches every day, taking many grenades, and whose sizable hearts drive them forward in spite of it all. Yes, Will Workers, I'm talking about you, so suck it up and take the compliment, will you? It's okay to be acknowledged once in a while. As a matter of fact, my guest today had some nice things to say on your behalf as well. But before we get into all the wonderful, courageous, and interesting things she's done in the world of insurance coverage, yes, I mean actual coverage, as in getting paid, I'd like to take just a few moments to tell you about those who are keeping Will Work for Patients working and on the air.
When you're on fire, people will come to watch you burn. That's not only the title of episode 39, but a direct quote referenced by Dr. Jerry Dreesen, Pacific Northwest chiropractor who succeeded, failed, and rose again, mastering a digital age. When I met him, he not only shared his success, he told me how he took his secret sauce and developed it into 5 distinct marketing assets any chiropractor can use to boom any practice. Still practicing, Dr. Jerry helps docs and pros grow with precise marketing techniques. What I like is that he shares his tools that have worked best for him time and again, literally to make every square foot of his practice earn revenue and top patient results. From exploiting reviews to capturing leads, I can tell you Dr. Jerry has the practice growth formula in hand. See for yourself. Visit dcmarketingproducts.com/podcast to get a free Huffington Post article written about you just for being a listener of Will Work for Patients. Let my good friend Dr. Jerry boost your credibility and give you some free marketing advice too. Visit dcmarketingproducts.com/podcast now. That's dcmarketingproducts/podcast.
All right, Will Workers, we're back, and now it's time to introduce someone to you I think you'll be very interested in, and whose story may just give you some hope where there has been little or none of late. I'm talking about insurance, folks, so listen up. Now, my guest today is an insurance advocate, and no, that doesn't mean she's the enemy or that she speaks out on behalf of insurance. She speaks out on behalf of the coveree, the insured, the one who has trouble getting paid. Now, do I have your attention? Who do you know who has had trouble getting paid? You know anyone like that? She's not only an expert in getting paid, she has gotten people, doctors and patients alike, paid and has worked to stop the nonsense happening within insurance companies that adversely affects the coverage of their insured. And man, is she going to astound you with some stories, included in which is how she was actually taught during her brief stint working in insurance to deny claims. I can't wait to get her to talk about that, but no spoilers, I promise. After winning her own battle with a severe medical condition and contemplating her life's direction career-wise, she found herself working in insurance, then working to help doctors get paid, and then advocating the patients themselves, on which I will have her elaborate in amazing detail and giving her own personal story. Once again, I have a guest with a similar background. I, as you know from episode 1, overcame a medical condition to journey forward into total advocacy of chiropractic and wellness. Only my corporate career in insurance preceded my illness. As a matter of fact, my guest and I worked for the same company all those years back and never met until this year. Such serendipity. But remember, folks, accidents don't happen to me. But I digress. Her book, Solved, Curing Your Medical Insurance Problems, very catchy title indeed, wouldn't you say, is a handbook for those seeking compensation and has driven many to her doorstep seeking help in advocating their case for coverage. And the book has received rave reviews from the likes of the Boston Globe and even Ralph Nader, who described my guest and her co-author as those who know the inside ways of sellers who try to take you to the cleaners. Isn't that awesome? Having been nominated for and receiving numerous awards and accolades, to date she humbly reports having helped get collected over $1 million a year since she started in insurance advocacy. She has taken insurance billing to new heights with due diligence she has put in on behalf of herself, her insured clients, and even doctors too, to make sure all get reimbursed fairly and not denied falsely, as well as to make sure those medical professionals who overbill don't get away with it, teaching the insured what to watch out for. Hey, wait a minute. Am I gushing again? Well, if you can accuse me of anything, it's gushing. I do it all the time. You know me so well, so please let me just knock it off and introduce her already. Speaking for herself, please welcome to Will Work for Patients, Ms. Adria Gross. Adria, welcome to the show. Say hello.
Thank you so much. I'm flattered to be part of your show and to speak before all of your guests.
It's very much heartfelt, and I heard you speak recently. I had the good fortune of seeing you at a talk last week. Such interesting things you had to say, and I could really see all that really comes through when you speak. So, of course, I give your bio from my viewpoint. Maybe you could just give me a brief overview of who you are and what you're about, what you're doing, what your goals are, and so on.
So every time I think of my story, I imagine people's reactions when they hear this. But I grew up in Orange County, New York, and I was in a class. It was at my synagogue. The rabbi was teaching the class, and all of a sudden I wasn't feeling well. We had a map of Israel that had to write down the cities. And I turned to him and I said, I'm really nauseous. And he thought I was trying to get out of this exam. He finally allowed me to go down the hall. I sat in a chair and went into a coma. So after going into the coma, 10 hours later, I wake up and I see a cross on the wall thinking, where am I, in heaven? It was a Catholic hospital. And that was the beginning of me living with seizures. I had encephalitis, which is an inflammation of the brain. I lived with epilepsy for almost 25 years of my life. I used to average 18 seizures a month.
Wow.
At one point, I was on 32 pills a day. It was uncontrollable. The seizures were uncontrollable. The longest period of time I ever went without a seizure was 3 months, but my average was 18 seizures a month. And it was a very tough life. I went to college. I lived in New York City. I could support myself, but I had all these seizures. And I went to school for education. They wouldn't certify me to be a teacher because of all the seizures. I worked in the garment industry for 10 years. And my doctor finally said to me, I think that you would be a good candidate for a left temporal lobectomy to get rid of the epilepsy. So they took the damaged area out of my brain, and I have been seizure-free ever since. The best part of it was, I said to my doctor, I'm not going back in the garment industry. I want to do something different. And I came through the back door of an insurance company. I was told, we want to make you a claims representative. And I said, okay. And then within a month, I became a supervisor of claims, where I took all the irate phone calls of all these denials. Within 2 weeks after I worked at that company, they taught me how to deny claims.
Wow.
So I worked at that company for 2 years. They relocated out of state, and I did training in the other states. And then I worked for another insurance company for 10 years. I started out in claims and then went into underwriting. But again, in the claims department, within 2 weeks, this is how you deny. So after doing that for 10 years, I then adopted kids from Vietnam. Took off a little bit of time. Worked for one of my own doctors. I wanted to learn the billing end. He taught me how to bill, and I opened a billing company, and I billed for multiple providers. But then when all these merges started happening, where you have the doctors, becoming part of a large group, I realized I couldn't run this business any longer. I do refer business out for billing, but I opened up a medical billing advocacy business in January of 2012, so it's been 5.5 years, and the savings have been absolutely phenomenal. When claims are denied, going nowhere, out of network, overcharged, I step in and I help. There are providers out there like yourselves where you might have a patient with multiple bills from multiple providers and they're not getting paid by their insurance company. So I step in and I help. This business has been phenomenal, especially to the point of saving millions of dollars for people annually.
Wow, Will Workers, there is so much to take away just from Adria's little bio, so much just from her story that we could take away and learn. I love the story, Adria, that goes along with it. All these years of seizures and finally solving the problem and really, persisting at it, and then, of course, that almost inevitable life direction change. Will Workers, she was working in the garment industry and then just decided after all of that, this wasn't enough. There was more to it than that. There was more to be done. That change in direction, though, Will Workers, and working for the insurance companies, this is where I resonate really well, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have Adria on the show. We have a very similar background. I didn't even know about chiropractic when I got into the insurance industry. I didn't know anything about wellness. It was well before I got very ill. And I looked at life in a much different way than I look at now. In fact, I thought chiropractic was a little bit of a joke, and the insurance industry gave me that viewpoint as well. When I went through my 3 months of training at the insurance company, I learned things too. Now, I wasn't taught to deny claims, but look at Adria. She was taught to deny claims. So this is some of the ridiculousness that happens here. And anyone like myself or you or Adria is going to, not in the right mind, be able to live with that. Eventually, you're going to have to do something about it. And Adria moved on to do that. And now she is advocating on behalf of patients to make sure that they are getting paid, and she's reclaiming all this money. And I'm sure, Adria, you have a lot of stories to share, and I'd like to grill you on a few of them. But right now what I'd like to ask you about is there's something very interesting in your evolution here to what you're doing now with the insurance advocacy. One of the things you did in getting out of insurance is you went into the billing end of it. You worked for a doctor, you learned the ropes of billing, and you learned how to bill. And from what I read in your book and some of what you told me, you also had to learn the ropes of actually getting that doctor paid and so on. So what I was wondering, is there anything you could tell of what you learned from that experience specifically? I'm sure our listeners, because our listeners are practice owners and many of them are, I loosely say, covered by insurance and, have billing issues and things like that. Is there anything that you could share in the way of your story or experiences there that could help us better understand this area?
Well, I think that the first thing, and this is the most important thing, is pre-authorization. Mm-hmm. If you don't have that pre-authorization, and some people, they might be out of network, I'm not going to get it, they might not know about it, I highly recommend for any provider, and I do this with my clients, when an individual calls me up and they're about to go for a procedure, the question is whether or not pre-authorization is required. And if they say no, the insurance company, you want it in writing.
Wow.
And if they say yes, you don't need it in writing, but just make sure you have it. And make sure you understand it, because when you get pre-authorization, there's two major factors. One of them is how many visits you're going to be allowed and within what time period. And that's more important than anything else. If pre-authorization is required and you don't have it, your claims are going to be denied.
Is it safe to assume you had to learn that the hard way a little bit?
No, for sure. And when I say in writing, because you could get a verbal approval, and they're going to turn around and say, we never told you that.
Right, your word against theirs at that point.
Exactly.
We all know who wins that battle. So pre-authorization. Any interesting stories, like in your years of collecting, that stick out in your mind as exemplary of that kind of denial?
I've seen it a lot. Some insurance companies, I don't know what's happening now, but I remember when I started out, it was just beginning, and it was limited. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's still many policies out there that will not pay for Chiro. But I have seen situations where they might even give someone like 50 visits of a certain time period. And they'll authorize it. They'll authorize it, you'll have it in writing, and then all of a sudden, we need medical records to prove these are still needed. They give you so many visits, and then it comes to a point where they're starting to question whether or not they should continue to pay it. And then they're going to ask for the medical records. And that's when the problem comes, where you have to prove that this service is still needed by the patient.
This brings up an interesting point. While we're talking about billing for doctors specifically, most of my listeners are practice owners, and they deal with these issues, and they also deal with their patients' issues. Many of them who don't take their patients' insurance still help with submitting for reimbursement, and patients do get denied. And we're just coming out of the Obamacare era, those 8 long years that we've had now, and Chapter 8 of your book, very interesting, covers the Affordable Care Act and Obamacare appeals. Can you just maybe elaborate a little bit on this section of appealing health plan decisions and what your rights are in regard to that, and where perhaps you also think that may go now that we're getting out of the Obamacare and with Trump in office now and some of the changes that are going to be made? Like, what are the patients' rights, and where do you see that as going? Do you see it as improving?
I just learned last week that what the Democrats were aiming for was to really come to single-payer or socialized medicine. And when you look at when Obamacare started, everybody was able to purchase anywhere between 2 to 4 different types of policies out there. Right now, you're lucky if you have one. There are areas where you can't even purchase it. The Democrats were hoping that we would have a Democratic president, and they had everything planned the way it was going to be. But it didn't work out that way. And Trump was elected, and nobody out there knows what the current administration is proposing. The only people who know are the ones who are really in the Senate and the House of Representatives. I did see about a publication that came out about a week ago. My attorney friend said, Adria, don't even waste your time reading it, because they felt unless it's passed, don't even take the time. Right. And right now, what I'm hearing on the news, there's at least 4 senators who are not agreeing to it.
So the basic rules of Obamacare still apply. They're still in full force, and so that would include the appeals process, yeah?
Right. So, look, the differences with Obamacare is there was no more pre-existing exclusions. That's number one. Now, there are on some, like, let's say you have a catastrophic plan, which is usually only available to people under the age of 30. On the catastrophic plan, they do have a right for pre-X. If you have a short-term policy, you have pre-X. If you have, in fact, I just have a new case that just came my way. It's involving at least $130,000. I just sent an agreement out last night for it. And also, if a policy has been grandfathered, if they've been allowed to grandfather, then you have pre-X. But by and large, on Obamacare, there is no more pre-X on most of the policies. That's number one. Number two, and this is a really scary thing that I see possibly happening. Before Obamacare started, there were limits on all of the policies, like you might have had a lifetime limit of $1 million or $2 million, and many of the self-insured companies that I heard about, they had a limit of possibly $30,000 to $35,000 lifetime. So when Obamacare came about, you no longer had a lifetime limit. It was unlimited. And they're thinking about getting rid of that. And what they're proposing right now for the changes, they're saying, okay, we're going to have money set aside for people with pre-existing conditions. The question is this: how much money is in there? Is it going to really cover everybody? And my gut feeling is, by the time we turn 40 years old, not everybody, but most people already have a condition that's pre-X. So what are they going to do? Deny everybody who has had this illness before from the age of 40 and up and not pay out any money?
I want to just read a quick quote from your book in Chapter 8 here. You said, you can appeal your insurance company's decision through an internal appeal in which you ask your insurance company to do a full and fair review of its decision. If your insurance company still denies payment or coverage, the law permits you to have an independent third party decide to uphold or overturn the plan's decision. This final process is often referred to as an external review. And you do get into each of those individual processes in some of the subsequent sections of this chapter there. And I just wanted to ask you real quick, because it seems like there's a lot more recourse than the average person or even the average doctor knows about here. It seems like that's the importance of people like reading your book or consulting someone like you, is that there is a lot of recourse, and it's not as hopeless as we all think. It's just that we're not really enlightened on this stuff. It's not really shared with us.
So, you know what, I'm going to share a story with you now, the case that I've been working on. It's now the end of June. I've been working on the case since last Christmas. So here's a situation where this woman is very depressed, has an alcohol diagnosis. It's very bad. So facility A she got authorization for, but she couldn't get authorization for facility B and wound up going to facility B. She's there for about a month. She gets denied. Facility B really didn't work for her. So she goes to facility C, and she does get pre-authorization. For her pre-authorization for facility C, which I was involved in, they gave her at first 5 to 7 days, and then we had to keep on calling one day before that authorization was over. She was in that facility for a total of, I think she was in there for 37 days. So even with all the pre-authorizations that she got to continue to be there, first of all, they wouldn't cover for 37 days. They only covered her for 34. Okay, this is going to shock everybody. At the facility, they were charging her $1,800 a day. Just last Friday, I heard back from the insurance company saying, we will cover her for $34 a day, and they were only going to pay originally $115 a day, but the fact that she was in another state, let's see if we can double that to $230. The phone call on Friday said to me, we are going to cover her for 34 days, times $230. So her family already paid for 37 days at $1,800 a day.
Wow.
And they agreed to cover her for 34 days at $230 a day. So you look at that, that's almost $1,600 out of pocket per day, where they only paid her $230. Now, this is the best of the whole thing. When you multiply $230 times 34, it comes out to a little over $7,500. Well, guess what? That went towards her $10,000 deductible last year. So what did they receive out of this? Zero. And the family already paid for her at $1,800 a day for 37 days.
My goodness.
And what are they getting back? Zero.
And I'm just looking at those figures, Adria. Will workers, think about it. If you were able to bill and receive $60 per visit, and let's say you had a patient on a 30-visit corrective care plan, that comes to $1,800 over 30 days. This is $1,800 per day for over 30 days. To put it in perspective, that would be 30 patients worth to a chiropractor, and only to a chiropractor who's getting reimbursed $60 for a visit, if that.
As you're saying this, you know what's going on in my head? Think about this for a minute. It gets even better. There are policies out there right now that have a $60, $70, $75, $100 copay. So even if you see that patient and you're charging them $60 and they're putting it towards their insurance, that might be part of their copay per visit. That's after. It gets even better. That's after. And I myself have a deductible for my family. I have a deductible of $6,200.
Yeah. Will workers, I don't know what else to say here. I mean, case in point on this story, and just those figures alone should really open your eyes to this, but not open your eyes in just an appalled way, but open your eyes to see that there is hope, because here's somebody right here who's doing something about it, who actually found out, look, there is recourse. And there's a couple of points I want to make about that. Number one, you can learn the ropes, and to do that, you need to go to an expert. And here, we're interviewing an expert right here. I have to tell you, not only should you be reading this book, you should be getting several copies and getting it distributed to your patients. I also want to make a point that even if you think you don't have insurance problems and you don't have problems getting paid in your practice, I want you to recognize one thing. How many of your patients have come to you from the medical mill after almost giving up hope on getting rid of their condition? They've been from doctor to doctor. Think about the expenses they've accumulated and many of these problems that they've had. This is something that you should be advocating to them, to contact someone like Adria or to read Adria's book, to be able to help them with their past trek on leading up to you. That could be giving them some of the challenges and issues they have in paying you right now. And you helping with that, paying it forward, I got to tell you, it will pay in spades. I don't think I have to tell you that. Adria, we're getting close to the end of the episode here, and I'd just like to ask you, what advice would you give to doctors specifically going forward in both getting paid on behalf of their patients' insurance and helping their patients get reimbursed properly? What advice would you give doctors to really navigate this and safely find their way through it to, making the money that they deserve?
Okay, first of all, what I learned over the years, 4 years after I opened up the billing company, they said to me, Adria, how do I get paid more? And the only way, what I learned, the bigger the group, the more you can demand from the insurance company. That's what I learned from that. The other thing that I mentioned earlier is you have to have pre-authorization. Your clients have to get the pre-authorization for them to be covered first. And the other thing that I want to say that we were starting to talk about before, you spoke about independent third party. I have a case right now where it was an external review. They still denied it, but there are 3 departments, not all states, but most states. You have Department of Insurance, Consumer Affairs, and Attorney General. And if that insurance company should definitely be paying the claim, and they're not, and you have had reviews, and you went possibly, you don't necessarily have to, go to an independent external review. Even if you haven't done that, you do have a right to contact the state. And I recommend it. I will say one other thing is the downfall of that is if your patient works for a self-insured company, which means a major company out there that might have over 1,000 employees, and they self-insure, you can't fight it with the state. They stay out of it. You can appeal to the Department of Labor, but you can't appeal it to the state. There are some states that might step in and help a little bit, but you might have to go, again, to Department of Labor within your state or the federal government.
Adria, I have to tell you, that was probably the foremost thing I took away from when we came last week to see your talk. It was something I hadn't considered, and I'm willing to bet many of my audience have not considered as well, these self-insured companies. Now, a lot of our doctors work with corporations. They go in to these corporations and they do these corporate screenings and they get patients from there, and they haven't really considered the whole self-insured thing, not in a sense that they don't realize they're self-insured, but what that actually means. And Will Workers, there's something, a major gem you can take away from what Adria said, in addition to all the great advice she gave you. The self-insured companies, the state is going to stay out of it. They're self-insured. There's no regulation there that's going to really protect you or give you recourse, and they stay out of it. I do like that you gave us a little light at the end of the tunnel and said the Department of Labor, because I don't think any of us would have thought of that either. So I think that's pretty brilliant that the Department of Labor, yes, but the state, no, in that sense. So that is sound advice for chiropractors. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And now for the last word. Who gets the last word? I do. After all, it's my show. What should you take away from today's episode? If anything, I'd like you to take to heart one thing. That no matter how down things look, no matter if you're getting paid or not, no matter if all hope seems lost, it isn't. Due diligence, a belief in what is true, and a desire to get a certain result is something you can achieve, and not even something as formidable as an insurance company, daunting as they may seem at times, can stop you from putting things right. Not getting paid is not an incurable disease. You perform miracles in your practice every day against what many call impossible odds. You take the bleak, defeatist outlook doled out to your patients by medicine and other nonsensical resources, and not only give them a glimmer of hope, but brighten that glimmer into a shining, laser-precise beam of light of confidence, mindset shift, and a resultant change of a condition which previously seemed impossible to defeat. You see, you do every day in practice something which is considered astounding by many. You do the impossible. Through your persistence and dedication, you see people through some way, somehow, and make things right which have prior been going very wrong. The ironic part is you have developed a bit of a defeatist attitude yourself. Your condition of not getting paid has led you to believe you are facing the impossible. Well, just as you step in and intervene when people have lost their way and lost their glimmer of hope, there is someone there to see you through too. Adria taught us today that insurance problems are not beyond cure, and that not only do you have value and are worth a great deal for what you do, but that can be proven and acknowledged. The millions she has helped collect for her numerous clients has proven it time and time again. And I can tell you from having attended one of her lectures, she is as dedicated and driven in what she does as you are in what you do. Isn't it time we stopped sulking about the impossible and started consulting someone who can help? After all, isn't that what you expect of your patients? Adria, I want to thank you so much for being here today. I can tell you just in the short time we had together, you've really given hope to an audience that's been sort of otherwise engaged on this subject in terms of just being defeatist. So I want to thank you for that. And right now, I would like to encourage them to reach out to you to be able to get your book, maybe get your book distributed to their patients, maybe ask you some questions. So let's start out. How would they contact you directly?
The best place to reach me is to write to me at Adria, ADRIA, at medwisebilling.com. Adria at medwisebilling.com. My phone number is 845-238-2532.
So Adria at medwisebilling.com, 845-238-2532. I'm assuming they can reach out to you there, both with questions about your book and also billing.
Right. I also own the billing business.
So there you have it, Will Workers. So do reach out to her if you're interested in any help with your billing or you have any questions regarding that. She is a fountain of knowledge, I can tell you, and she's very good at what she does. And now, of course, I'm most interested in your book as well. I would love for every chiropractor to read your book and every wellness professional who has anything to do with insurance, or even if they don't, because many wellness professionals who aren't covered by insurance are seeing patients and clients who have been denied through the insurance mill, through all the medicine that they had to navigate through to get to maybe the holistic health that they're doing now. So I want all these professionals to read your book, and I want them to get their patients and clients to read it. So how would they go about getting a hold of a copy of your book and getting a hold maybe of multiple copies as well?
Well, let me just give you the two different titles of the books. When Ralph Nader read the draft for the U.S. edition, Solve Curing Your Medical Insurance Problems, he wanted an international edition. The international edition is called Multi-Payer Medicine Nightmare, Made in the USA. If you can look for both of them on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, but if you go to my website, medicalinsurancedvocacy.com, right on the home page on the upper right-hand corner, you can click on the book and it will take you right to Amazon to purchase Solve.
All right, so the two books, the U.S. edition, Solved, Curing Your Medical Insurance Problems, and the international edition, Multi-Payer Medicine Nightmare, Made in the USA. You can find the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but the best thing to do perhaps is go to Adria's website, medicalinsurancedvocacy.com, and in the upper right-hand corner you'll see the book icon there, and when you click on it, it'll take you right to Amazon where you could buy the book. I, again, want to encourage you to buy multiple copies, get it on your front counter, get your patients reading it, put it in your waiting room, get your colleagues, family, friends, associates to read it. This could even help your family as well. If you are really that ambitious as well, which you should be if you haven't gotten the idea by now, I would also like you to reach out to Adria for those multiple copies, because, Adria, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is it safe to assume that I could convince you that if one of or more of these professionals buy multiple copies of your book and put it in their waiting room and get it distributed and so on, that you will go ahead and, let's say, I don't know, give a free talk, maybe like a webinar, that they could have a bunch of patients in their waiting room and put you up on the screen?
I think that's a great idea.
Let's do that.
I do speak all over. In fact, sometime in the next 12 months I'll be speaking at the New York City Library.
And folks, I can tell you it was extremely informative. The people that were at the talk, that when I saw Adria speak last week, they were asking tons of questions. Everybody she meets has run into these problems before. If you yourself have ever been to the emergency room and gotten multiple bills from multiple providers about services you didn't even know you had, you've at least experienced part of what she talks about. So she gets into everything, and I got to tell you, she's got a lot of it solved. So buy that copy for yourself, buy multiple copies for your patient, and then reach out. Adria at medwisebilling.com, 845-238-2532. Contact her. Buy those copies and make her speak to your group. In fact, I'm willing to bet she'd do it more than once if you asked her nicely. So thank you again for that generous offer, Adria. And by the way, again, I know I said it before, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. I think you're providing not just a valuable service, but you're doing something that's really making a difference in the world. And I just want to really commend you and acknowledge you for what you've done with your own life to affect that you saw a problem and you just said, I'm going to take responsibility for this thing, and you're really doing it. So I want to acknowledge you, and I really want to thank you emphatically for being here on the show today and speaking to my listeners.
Thank you for allowing me this special time. I love educating others, because the major reason for bankruptcy in the United States are medical bills.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and well said. Thanks again.
Thank you.
So, my friends, we've come to the end of a hope-restoring episode. On behalf of myself, my staff, my guest Adria Gross, and the rest of the Broadcast Wellness crew, I thank you so very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another insurance-busting episode of Will Work for Patients. So long.
Be sure to subscribe and share. Will Work for Patients has been brought to you courtesy of Screening Experts, bringing unscripted simplicity to chiropractic marketing complexity. Today's episode, copyright Screening Experts LLC, musical score composed and arranged by Frank Sardella ASCAP. For more information, visit screeningexperts.com.